History tells us that empires are built on land. They are built on vast fields of wheat, on mountains of iron, and on the backs of million-man armies. Rome had legions, the Mongols had horses, the British had coal, but for 1,100 years, the most dangerous state in Europe had none of these things. It didn't even have solid ground. It was a city built on a mistake, a city floating on a malaria-infested swamp, a republic that produced nothing, yet owned everything. This is the story of the most serene Republic of Venice, a state that turned a muddy lagoon into a vault of gold, a nation that invented the modern world, not through heroism, but through ruthless, cold-blooded capitalism. They were the first to realize that you don't need to conquer the world with swords if you can simply buy it. You're watching Be Explained, and this is the story of the vampire of the Mediterranean, the empire of the swamp. To understand the darkness of Venice, you must understand its birth. It wasn't founded by conquerors, it was founded by cowards. In the 5th century, the Roman Empire was burning. The Huns, led by Attila the Scourge of God, were sweeping through Italy, slaughtering everyone in their path. The people of the mainland were terrified. They ran to the coast looking for escape, but there were no ships, so they ran into the mud. They fled to the tiny shifting islands in the lagoon, a place so miserable, so wet and so useless that even the barbarians didn't bother following them. But you cannot build a marble palace on mud. It sinks. To survive, the early Venetians had to perform an engineering miracle that defies logic even today. They realized they couldn't build on the ground. They had to build under it. They cut down entire forests in the regions of Istria and Dalmatia, what is now modern-day Slovenia and Croatia. They transported these massive oak and alder trunks to the lagoon and drove them vertically deep into the clay. We are talking about 10 million trees hammered into the dark, oxygen-starved mud. In this airless environment, the wood didn't rot. It underwent a process of mineralization. Over centuries, the wood literally turned to stone. The glittering city you see today is actually a tombstone sitting on top of a petrified forest. It is a city built on the corpses of trees floating on water, defying nature itself. Once they were safe, the Venetians realized something crucial. They had no food. They had no fresh water. They had no farmland. If they wanted to eat, they had to trade. And so, they became the most ruthless merchants in human history. While the rest of Europe was obsessed with religion, honour and feudal loyalty, Venice was obsessed with one thing: profit. Their motto was chillingly simple: Siamo Veneziani, poi Cristiani. We are Venetians, then Christians. They traded with everyone. They sold timber and iron to the Muslims in Egypt, even when the Pope threatened to excommunicate them. They sold slaves to the Ottomans. They sold silk to the French. They didn't care whose money it was, as long as it ended up in the Venetian treasury. They invented the concept of the state bond, borrowing money from their own citizens to fund wars and paying them back with interest. They invented double-entry bookkeeping. They invented the insurance policy. They turned war into a business transaction, and business was good. But the true genius and the true evil of Venice revealed itself in the year 1204. This is the moment Venice went from a rich city to a global superpower. The Pope had called for a fourth crusade to liberate Jerusalem. A massive army of French knights arrived in Venice, asking for a fleet of ships to carry them to the Holy Land. The Venetians built the ships, but when it came time to pay, the Crusaders were broke. They couldn't afford the ticket price. The Doge of Venice was a man named Enrico Dandolo. You need to remember this name. He was over 90 years old. He was completely blind, but he was perhaps the sharpest, most dangerous mind of the Middle Ages. Dandolo didn't get angry. He saw an opportunity. He told the Crusaders, "I will defer your payment. I will give you the ships for free, but in exchange, you must do a favour for Venice." He didn't ask them to fight Muslims. He asked them to attack the Christian city of Zara, a Venetian trade rival. The Crusaders hesitated. Attacking fellow Christians was a mortal sin, but they were trapped. They agreed. But Dandolo wasn't finished. Once the Crusaders had blood on their hands, he pushed them further. He convinced the entire crusade to forget about Jerusalem entirely. He pointed them toward the greatest prize on earth, Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the protector of Christendom, and Venice's only real competitor. In a betrayal that shocked the world, the Venetian fleet and the French knights sacked Constantinople. They burned the library, they smashed the icons, they stole the gold. Dandolo, the blind old man, stood on the deck of his galley, listening to the sounds of the greatest Christian city in the world burning to the ground. He had tricked the Pope's army into destroying his business rival. Venice didn't just win. They stole the 4 horses of St. Mark from the Hippodrome of Constantinople and placed them on their own cathedral as a trophy of theft. With Constantinople gone, Venice owned the Mediterranean. But to keep it, they needed ships. Lots of them. Enter the arsenal. In a world of craftsmen and slow labour, the Venetian arsenal was a vision of the future. It was a factory of death. It was so terrifyingly efficient that the poet Dante Alighieri visited it and used it as the inspiration for the 8th circle of hell in his Inferno. It covered 15% of the entire city. It employed 16,000 men. And it operated on a system that wouldn't be seen again until Henry Ford, the assembly line. A standard galley hull would be towed down a canal. At the first window, workers would pass out the ammunition. At the next, the ropes. At the next, the bread. At the next, the guns. It is said that when the King of France visited Venice, the Doge wanted to impress him. He sat the king down for dinner. While they ate the first course, workers laid the keel of a ship. By the time they finished dessert, the ship was fully rigged, manned and launched out of the harbour. They could build a warship in a single day. No other nation on earth could compete with that industrial speed. So, how does a titan like this fall? Venice was impenetrable. It was surrounded by water. Its navy was invincible. Its walls were made of money. But in the end, Venice wasn't destroyed by an enemy army. It was destroyed by a piece of paper, a map. In 1492, a Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus, working for Spain, stumbled upon the Americas. 5 years later, Vasco da Gama sailed around Africa to India. Suddenly the world changed. The spice trade didn't have to go through the Mediterranean anymore. The Portuguese and Spanish could sail directly to the source. The Venetians were the toll booth operators on a road that nobody used anymore. The gold stopped flowing. The palaces began to peel. The great families spent their dwindling fortunes on parties and masquerade balls, hiding behind masks while their empire rotted from the inside out. They became a tourist attraction for the rich of Europe, a museum of a dead superpower. Finally, in 1797, Napoleon Bonaparte marched to the edge of the lagoon. He didn't even have to fire a shot. The Great Council, terrified and broke, voted to dissolve themselves. The Doge handed over his hat, and the Republic of Venice ceased to exist. Venice leaves us with a haunting lesson. It proves that a state can be built on nothing but ambition. It proves that money is a sharper weapon than steel. But it also proves that no matter how much gold you hoard, you cannot buy your way out of history. When the world changes, you must change with it, or you will sink back into the mud. Thanks for watching. What do you think? Was Dandolo a genius or a villain? Let us know in the comments. See you in the next video.